Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to Spy Magazine co-founder, Studio 360 radio host, and cultural dream catcher, Kurt Andersen. Oh yeah, he's also got a new novel out this week called True Believers. That might have something to do with why he's here, I suppose. Stick around and prepare to have your psychedelic vest, long hair, hippie beads, and two-finger peace sign implode from Kurt's re-examination of 1960s America. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience of three-fingered vulgarians, Martha Stewart wannabes, Walter Monheit, the publisher of Vanity Fair, two guys who insist they were not separated at birth, and people who can no longer squint hard enough to read the fine print, in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. Kurt Andersen has one of those careers that make him the envy of a lot of folks in the media. The guy's had a fairly golden touch, starting with the birth of the late, great humor magazine, Spy, which he co-founded with Graydon and Tom Phillips. He's also been a columnist for The New Yorker and editor-in-chief of New York. And he currently hosts, and has for the last 10 years, I hear, public radio's popular Studio 360, which won a Peabody Award. All that, and he tells a pretty fair story on the fictional side, too. First, as the author of Heyday and Turn of the Century, and most recently with the just-released True Believers. Now, I wanted to hate True Believers, frankly, just because Andersen does too many things too well. But it just wasn't possible. It's a really cool read on multiple levels. For starters, the narrator is a 60-ish woman once under serious consideration for a seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. That by itself is a neat trick for Andersen. He's telling his story, which of course is her story, in Karen Hollander's voice. And then there's all this bouncing back and forth between the current day, well actually it's set in a time slightly in the future, and back to 1968, a time in which Karen was quite a different person, one with a pretty big secret. Now it's an easy book to recommend for me, and it's a pleasure to welcome its author to our world for the next half hour. Kurt Andersen, welcome to Mr. Media.
Great to be here, Bob. And after that introduction, I think let's just send your viewers home to go buy the book and call it a day.
Yeah, nice try. No. No, you're going to have to put up with the actual questions now.
Okay.
We'll see what happens. Okay. So, and I'm going to read this because it's a little lengthy, but I want to make sure I get it right. So, it's 1989, one of the funny years. And a press release about a book has come across the editor's desk at Spy. It's by Clay Felker, or maybe Adam Moss, or better still, bosomy dirty book writer Shirley Lord Anderson Rosenthal. It's a novel in which the author takes on the voice of his or her sexual opposite, and it jumps back and forth between the Bush era, the first Bush era, and the Eisenhower presidency. Now, you haven't read the book, you just have this press release, but you've formed an opinion just based on the description, right? How does Spy handle that press release?
Well, Spy in 1989, if there was a person like me, and whether it's Adam Moss or somebody else, Spy would yes, savage me, savage Graydon, probably even more. We would definitely be figures of fun in Spy magazine. So I don't know. I'd have to put on my mischief hat and figure out how I could best deconstruct such a book to make mockery of it. And I haven't given any time to doing that with my fresh new baby yet, so I don't know exactly. But you're absolutely the premise is correct. Graydon and I are exactly the sorts of people that Spy would have reveled in taking down a few pegs.
It's funny how that all comes around, isn't it?
Wasn't the plan. The plan was just to keep doing that until we couldn't do it anymore. We really, I mean, it was Spy that
Right.
we weren't, or speaking for myself, but I think also for Graydon, I wasn't looking for that as the jumping off point to anything else. Indeed, we really thought we were burning so many bridges that we would have to remain in our little fortress for the rest of our lives.
Well, and I think a lot of people then, Mr. Trump, for example, probably thought you would have no careers outside of Spy because of the number of bridges that were burned, and I imagine at that time, the late '80s, early '90s, you would probably think, yeah, if we can survive on our budget and we can sell some advertising and make a go of this, then this could be a long-term career.
Oh, for sure. And we the first few years we're not only did we do what I think is a good thing and people liked it and all that, but we were actually breaking even, making money after 3 years. So it for a while there it looked like, wow, this could be something we do for a long time. There was no plan B. I mean, or this is the first phase of career that has these other chapters.
This I was going to come to this later, but since we're talking about it now, let's continue with it. Before Spy started, people who knew you and Graydon, did they think of you as those smarmy guys, those guys who were kind of pointing the finger and kind of making jokes about people?
Not so much. I mean, a little bit maybe. I mean, I think we were, yeah, like writers do, like journalists do. You have a drink and you make jokes and you have fun. But I don't think in any kind of extreme way. We weren't the class clowns. But so no, we just got together and started talking about sort of as a lark what kind of magazine we wished existed that we would love, and one thing led to another.
Would it be safe? And there's a lot of people who are going to see this or hear this who will not know Spy from that period of time, or
You
may
mean
not
young
know it at
people?
all. I'm sorry?
You mean young people?
Yeah, like my teenager, for example.
Yeah.
And so I want to explain. The National Lampoon probably has the bigger name, and it's continued in film and stuff.
Yeah.
So correct me if I get this wrong. I would explain to someone that the National Lampoon was a humor magazine that everything had a basically generally a fictional basis. There was parody, but it was fictional. And Spy,
Right.
on the other hand, tended to have a real basis. It was based on real people, real facts, and then it looked for that it kind of that twist in whatever
Yeah.
it was, the
No, that's
irony.
exactly right. It was, I mean, when people call Spy a humor magazine, I don't correct them necessarily, but it wasn't a humor magazine in the sense that National Lampoon was. It was really a magazine of satirical journalism. It was really driven by reporting, research, but then instead of just reported and presented straight, it was given a satirical edge. I mean, one thing you might say to your teenager or young people is it was more similar to, say, the Daily Show than it is to the National Lampoon.
It was as different. Okay, yeah, let's go with that. It was the Daily Show of its time, whereas
Back when that was monthly, back in the old days when you could only do that once a month. Yeah,
right, and whereas say the Onion would be the National Lampoon of its time, sort of.
yeah, that's sort of right.
A
I
little
mean,
closer.
National Lampoon, if it were focused as the Onion is entirely on sort of newsy things, but yeah, that's right. That's a fair analogy.
And you folks who don't know what we're talking about, you missed a lot of great stuff. Go look it up. There's a great book. Wait a minute, I wasn't going to do this, but there's a great book that it's all captured in here. It's Spy: The Funny Years. Go buy this book. This is
Well, and you can also just see every issue of Spy for free at Google Books
ah,
as well. And so if you really have a Jones for what we were doing back in the late '80s and '90s.
it's a very cool amount of stuff. Okay, so maybe we'll come back to Spy in a minute, but I want to come back to True Believers. And the reason I asked you that question, complete with Shirley Lord reference, was that I'm thinking that there is this vast gulf between the life and outward beliefs of the narrator in your book, Karen Hollander, and who she was in '68, who she is in the 21st century, at least outwardly. And in that regard, is it unfair to say that there's some similarity between who Kurt Andersen was 25, 30 years ago and who he is now?
Well, I mean,
What are you hiding, Kurt? That's what I want to know.
well, nothing as interesting or large as what Karen Hollander is hiding in the novel. But I think, no, if anything, I think I'm pretty straightforward about what I've done and who I am. One time, somebody, while I was when I was a magazine editor, a famous person said, "Oh, we can dig up everything you've ever done. Go ahead." And I thought about that after that threat was made. I thought, like, what? What are you going to get on me? So, no, I don't think so. We were all young ones, and thank God there are no Facebook videos of me, tripping on acid or what all the other things I did. But no, but what I realized once I had this story and wrote this story is that she's an extreme example, I think, of most of us. I think most of us have, little secrets on a daily basis of things we don't tell everybody. Not you. We all have our secrets, and that's fine, especially in this, TMI age.
Was it, I'm thinking that the biggest challenge in writing this book had to be writing in this woman's voice, and not just in a woman's voice, but in the voice of this woman who, obviously, she's got a secret. We're not going to get into that, but she's got this secret. She's lived quite the interesting life, and she's got a daughter and a granddaughter, and she sees herself in the granddaughter. She doesn't see herself very much in her daughter, and there's a lot of emotion that comes out of her relative to the people in her life that are, I would say, is not a natural voice for most men.
Well, I mean, what one tries to do when one writes fiction usually is get into the heads and experience the inner lives of people unlike you, whether they lived in the 19th century, whether they're black and you're white, and this is just a different version of that difference. So, yeah, it was daunting to both write my first novel in the first person and to make it a woman. And I did a lot of sort of essentially sketches before I really began, just trying to figure out the voice. And then I had, a house full of daughters and a wife and nothing but female editors and agents to tell me where I was going wrong.
Oh, not that happened, of course.
No, not a bit. Not a bit. They said it was perfect out of the gate.
Can you? All right. Well, skipping past that comment for a minute, can you take me back to the process while you're in process with the book and you're doing drafts, and we know that there's multiple drafts and there's things going on, where the women in your life, perhaps whether it be editors, or wife, daughters, were pointing out a woman would not say that, or she would not say it that way. Was there any examples of that?
It wasn't so much she wouldn't say that. There was, for instance, my younger daughter, there's a scene where the granddaughter, Waverly, to whom Karen Hollander is very close, is sunbathing in her backyard in Los Angeles, and in a draft that my daughter read, she said, where the kid was topless, she said that girl would, even with her grandmother, even in the backyard, I swear to you, Dad, would have a top on. So I took her word for it, and I changed that. So that was an example. I had a conversation with one of my editors about pornography. That there's a mention of pornography in the book, and Karen has seen it a few times. I had a somewhat more elaborate passage about pornography, and it was an interesting conversation. And I know for a fact that there are women who enjoy and watch pornography, but it wasn't an important enough thing to press the issue. So those are two that I think of. Sex, of course, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But then there's also a scene, as you know, when Karen is young and she gets her period, and that required a conversation with daughters and wife about that. Not what happens. I know the facts, but about the psychology of that.
I would say, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I would say, as a dad of a teen daughter, I thought that was very well handled. It was a little awkward, a little embarrassing, and probably very true for a lot of people.
Well, I was interviewed yesterday by a woman 1 year younger than Karen Hollander on a WBUR in Boston, the public radio station. And again, when she said she didn't say how dare you write as a woman. She sort of said, how did you manage to do this? How did you manage to steal my thoughts? So that was nice. Something not related to me or employed by me, telling me that she thought I'd done it pretty well.
So did you tell her how you got her thoughts? That you
I did,
got plants in her?
I explained the devices we have in her office.
The other thing about that, I think, is I can't remember. How old is Karen? I wanted to say she was in her early 60s.
She was born in 1949. So as of today, she would have just turned, in 2012, she would have just turned 63.
Okay, so that's about what I thought.
So she's and so the book starts next year. So she's 64 when the book starts.
Okay, so that's what I thought. That's why I wanted to ask this. So Karen is essentially in her early to mid 60s. And she has a pretty free and open attitude about sex. She actually has it quite a lot at her age. And I wondered if any of the women in your life who were reading behind you, or had any opinion about that. If they thought it was if she was having a little too much sex, if maybe she was her opinion, her view of it being her very liberal attitude towards it seemed a little off to anyone.
Not at all. And remember, I mean, she was 18 in 1968. 63, 64, 65-year-old people, women or men, are not the same as I think we're still stuck with this idea of, 63, 64. You never have sex anymore, and you just don't think about that anymore. Well, that's ridiculous. And again, one of the things that changed in the 60s, I don't have her say this or say this in the book anywhere, but it is exactly that the received ideas of what it means to be 30, what it means to be 40, what it means to be 60 are kind of shot to hell. And you can be youthy forever. And yes, I know lots of women who have perfectly delightful sexual lives in their at that age. So no, nobody ever said none of my team of women ever said, really, at all. And again, you for people who haven't read it, she's not like doing it all the time. She has a boyfriend whom she sees every few months
when she needs something from him.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was part of what I was wondering
That's
about.
True.
That's
true.
She is trading a
little bit, but not. I mean, and she's cops to that, but she also is still fond of this guy with whom she had an affair 15 years before.
Well, I think one of the differences between 1968 and say 2014, 15, 13, wherever we are with in the book, is that men and women in their 60s today don't look like the men and women in their 60s in 1968. And while that's the case, there's still not a lot of acknowledgement about too much sexual activity at that age. So that's the reason I asked the question.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, have you watched TV lately? I've seen a few ads for pills that correct erectile dysfunction. I mean,
I hear a former presidential candidate is
exactly. No, I mean, really. It never occurred to me. But it's interesting that people that it's been raised not quite as explicitly as you've raised it here, and I just find it absurd. I mean, that we don't think people who are 60 still want to do it.
Next week on Studio 360, women in their 60s who still want to do it.
That's right. Exactly. Thank you. I'll give you full credit too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So one of the things in the book that's also very prominent is the detail in the 60s. Not just I referenced at the top of the show hippie beads and psychedelic vests and long hair.
I don't think
But
there are any hippie beads in the entire book, brother.
well, okay, that's just
Or psychedelic vests.
my that's the way I remember the 60s.
Okay.
Okay. But there's a lot of detail, a lot of political detail, a lot of very specific stuff. I wondered how much, because you knew you'd be called on any of that stuff that if you got it wrong. So how much effort did you have to put into, verifying and making sure you got it right?
Well, any fiction I write where there's real stuff, bits of history, for instance, I'm as careful as I can be, and and with anything you write, you read it 159 times, and so each time so do I know that's right, and check and recheck, and one of the reasons I like to do that is because then when I make up things and stick it among the real, I love it when people can't tell the real from the fictional. That's one of the pleasures I get out of writing fiction.
I'd love to ask you about some of the events in '68 later on, but I think it'd be giving too much away. So let's just say that would be a tease for people to go and read the book. Were there was this book, was giving birth and executing this book any more difficult than the other fiction that you've written?
They're all novels are really hard to do, period. And it's my third one that I finished, and so I have I'm now well into that 10,000 hour principle. I've done this a lot, so on a certain technical level, I know what I'm doing more and have a certain amount of more confidence. But there's always, once you're into it, I think, and I talk to other writers about this, every third day you think it sucks, and you don't know what you're doing. But and to some degree, I anyway set up deliberately or semi-consciously set up new challenges to make it a little harder. So I didn't make it first person in order to make it harder for myself. I had narrative reasons to do that, but I hadn't done that before at this length. So that was a new technical challenge, as well as making it a woman, which again I didn't do like, ooh, let me see if I can do this, but it was a new technical challenge. But this, so what was harder about this is it has a more necessarily precisely constructed clockworks of plotting and threads, and it's a mystery. It is, among other things, a mystery, and therefore how the information is revealed and fed out, and how the pipe is laid, as they say in Hollywood, was much more. It was a more meticulous thing than I had to do with the previous books. But as I say, all books have a kind of complicated. All novels that I've written anyway have a complicated engineering and architecture that take a lot of work. And this one, in certain ways, had more wiring in it.
How the pipe is laid, is that sort of one of those bosomy dirty writer references?
No, they talk about laying pipe.
Here we go again.
You porn hound. No, it just means doing the foundation so that it pays off later.
So, all right, let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Studio 360 for a few minutes. I think we've covered the book. I think I made it clear I really like the book, and I think people should read it. So I discovered Studio 360 being in the hinterlands of, the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg. I actually discovered it not over broadcast air, but on Stitcher. The Stitcher mobile app, which a lot of people listening to this, that's how they've found Mr. Media. And I would describe for them, people who haven't found it yet, as sort of a magazine for the imagination, just in the way that, in a lot of ways, I thought of Spy as kind of a magazine for the eyes, both because you would wear out your eyes trying to read the fine print, and also because there were a lot of clever things going on with Photoshop and designs.
No, Bob.
No Photoshop.
Photoshop days. We spent
really
insane amounts of money on expensive, these like computers that could do art for the covers, where we would have water being thrown on Ted Kennedy, and we spent untold sums because Photoshop didn't exist Anyway, just for the record.
Thank you. I'm glad you pointed that out, because now everything we see that's been altered, we think of as Photoshop. But yeah, I wasn't thinking about that. You're right. That was pre. So and actually the famous Hillary Clinton shot in the I think it's like a bustier or a
Yes.
S&M
A
kind of thing.
dominatrix, a leather dominatrix outfit.
That's the word. Thank you. I knew you'd know the word. That was an actual photo shoot, right? There was no
No, she just did.
chicanery
She
there.
volunteered and did that for us. Yeah. We did. I mean, one of the fun things about Spy, of course, was that we did get a lot of famous people to play along and pose for our covers because the stories weren't about them. They would just illustrate stories, and that was part of the fun. And again, in retrospect, one of the things we did right was to get celebrities to play along and sort of give us a certain amount of their fairy dust as we were getting started.
And it worked. I mean, it's a very appealing on the newsstand. But I'm sorry, I got us away from where I was going with this. And that was, how do you explain Studio 360 to someone who hasn't heard it before? Was I close or a little off?
Magazine Imagination. Honestly, I've never heard that, and it's a great line. And that I might actually steal from you. And
Here we go
of course,
again.
pay the high public radio royalties that would entail. It is. It's a weekly magazine about culture, pop culture, high culture, the arts, all of that stuff, and about ideas and conversations with the makers of films and music and books, and about how they do what they do, and yeah, we try to look at the whole culture and not just one little sector, which are so much of culture and cultural coverage has become of, the people who read Pitchfork for the kind of music they like read Pitchfork, and the people who, read the opera news read that. We try to sort of still regard it as one big fabulous panorama and look at all the stuff we like or are interested in.
I liked there was a made me laugh. There's this week's show has some interesting features, but the tagline. Somewhere on, I think, the Studio 360 site, kind of teasing what's coming up. It's like at the bottom right. It just says women directors, dirty projectors. I thought, I don't know what the connection is, but I thought
That's funny.
It made me laugh. Yeah.
And our web editor is a woman, so written by a woman. By the way.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's just there's a lot of interesting stuff on there, and I enjoy it. And it's the kind of thing where there's going to be weeks where there's going to be stuff that you're less interested in, than other weeks you're going to be more interested in. One of the ones that I liked recently was you went to the shooting gallery with Joel Stein, and
Yeah, it was huge fun. Yeah.
and you made him look pretty bad too, which I enjoyed.
Well, yeah, it was a Father's Day piece, and he has this book out about trying to become a man because he suddenly has a infant son, and he hadn't gone to a shooting range in the book, and so he was coming to New York, and I've always loved the idea that there is this shooting range in the middle of Manhattan, and so I said, let's go.
Times Square, I think it's called.
No, well, yeah, that's in the 70s maybe. No, it's down in 20. It's in Chelsea of all places, and so we went, and I hadn't shot a rifle in since the 1960s, literally, and. We both shot, and I did really, really well, and he didn't. It was great.
Yeah, you get the last line in too. Of course, it's your show, but yeah, it's kind of fun. I beat him. I really did. I'm not making it up. I really did beat him. So,
no, fun.
So what I wanted to know is for your next mano a mano competition, maybe arm wrestling Andersen Cooper. I'm thinking it could be. Andersen with an O versus Andersen with an E for all the 360 marbles. What do you think?
Very good. I'm there. Bring it on. And of course, the Studio 360 with Kurt Andersen existed before AC 360, just for the media record.
10 years now, I hear.
Actually, almost 12. But yeah, it did. I would love to do that. I know Andersen a little bit, very, very slightly. We were once going to have a meeting at breakfast, and he called me and said, "Oh, I got to go downtown. There's something going on." It was the 11th of September in 2001. So, but for that, Andersen and I would be close friends today.
And he probably would not be the star that he is now, interestingly enough.
There you go.
All right, so let's kind of finish by talking a little bit about Spy, and we'll kind of wrap up there. I've had a couple of your compadres from that era on this show talking about the magazine. Jamie Malinowski was on, and then I know I'm forgetting someone, but also some of the guys who also followed your run there. Tony Hendra's been here, and even poor guy, Spy's final editor, perhaps the man who in some ways drove it into the ground, Bruno Maddox. And
He's very funny about that.
Yeah, no, he has a good attitude. I appreciate that. He had a good attitude in the waning months of his run, and it seems like he has since then. It didn't turn into something that ran forever and ever. We were talking actually before we went on air about this. That was also the era of Might magazine. Dave Eggers, a little later on, who's also had quite a career as a writer now. You mentioned to me that you and Dave had actually talked about a project. Can you tell us a little about that?
Dave and I are friendly and have been for since before our breaking work. And when we were first getting to know each other, actually it was a little later than we were first getting to know each other. We got to talking about we could put out a one-shot magazine, printed magazine, that would pretend as though Spy had never gone out of business, that Might had never gone out of business, that they had both continued, and then at some point in the recent past merged into a magazine called Spite, which I, as an alternative history, and so it would be the function of that alternative history. But one thing led, he had giant philanthropies to run and novels to write, and so did I. So that we haven't done that, but I love the idea. He when we first met, he told me he was influenced by Spy, and he actually gave the perfect, great blurb for that Spy book that you held to the camera earlier. So I feel like we were he was my, if not little brother, cousin or something in terms of Might and Spy.
And perhaps the ultimate way that those magazines come together is that Trump finally succeeds, and let's say he buys both, and he puts them together, and he's behind Spy.
Dude, good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, good idea.
All right, I better stop while I'm ahead here, because I've
got
four good ideas.
Isn't it amazing, though? Somebody was just asking me about Spy. I was talking to somebody about this book, and I was talking about Trump, and it is incredible to me. No, they asked, what would Spy be doing today? Who would Spy be going after today? And I thought, well, the same guy we did then, Donald Trump. And
it's astonishing, isn't it? That he thrived. Nothing. It seemed like there were probably other people whose careers you probably had a bigger impact on in many ways, but he just got bigger and bigger. No matter how much he was parodied, no matter three-fingered vulgarian, you could.
Of course. He has become, freakish. Not that he wasn't freakish, but yeah, no, he has, but thrived he has, and it's incredible. I basically am completely entertained by him, except on the Bertha thing. The Bertha thing was the first thing Donald Trump ever did that I couldn't just laugh off as easily. But no, he is still a pretty amazing character that I love to watch.
I agree with you. He is his own self-parody on Celebrity Apprentice, but yeah, the Bertha thing. It's like, I don't know. It's like he kept pushing to the edge of the cliff, and then he went over it. Somehow he had avoided going over the cliff all these years.
Yeah.
And there he is, with Thelma and Louise, just going right over.
And it's as if he didn't quite realize that this wasn't going to work for him.
Yeah.
That was his story, and he was sticking to it.
I don't know how he didn't know that was the point to stop was right there.
Yeah.
Oh well. Well, listen, folks. You can find the new novel of political intrigue and mystery, True Believers, by writer Kurt Andersen, in great bookstores everywhere, or you can order it right now at a great price at MrMedia.com. And I think whether you're a liberal or a conservative, I think you will enjoy this very fast-moving read through an era that still reverberates very loudly today. You've got two websites I think we're going to give out, studio360.org for the radio show, and Kurt Andersen, and Andersen with an E, unlike the other guy with an O, kurtandersen with an E.com. you're on Twitter and Facebook. Do you want people to find you there as well?
Sure, absolutely. I'm KB Andersen at Twitter. Andersen also with an E, and I have a Facebook author page that can have as many fans as there are in the world.
Very good.
I reached a maximum on my personal page, so I recently shifted over to this, and now there's no limit.
Love me.
Yes, exactly.
Friend me.
No, like me.
Like me. Tweet me.
Yes.
And before I let you go, I understand your creation in True Believers has her own Twitter account also.
She does. So I'm told. Yes, Karen Hollander 1.
No, the number 1.
The numeral 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
She tweets sometimes.
Very cool.
When things that relate to her life happen.
I read that she's working on her memoirs.
That's what she says, and they should probably come out in, I guess, 2015.
Yeah, should be interesting. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
Kurt Andersen, I can't tell you, we've had a little communication over the last 2-3 months. I've been trying to lure you here. I'm so delighted that you came. I enjoyed the book and the show, and thanks for joining us on Mr. Media today.
It was a complete pleasure. Thank you.
You can see and hear almost 1,000 Mr. Media interviews by visiting our main site, mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. Or check out the more than 200 video interviews on the Mr. Media radio site on YouTube. And I'd sure appreciate if you'd show some love for Mr. Media's advertisers, including Stitcher. Apple named Stitcher a top 5 news app of 2011. It's a free mobile app for your smartphone or tablet that lets you listen to your favorite shows and discover the best of news, entertainment, and sports on demand. You can listen whenever you want to more than 5,000 shows, get customized recommendations, and discover what your friends are listening to. My own list of Stitcher favorites is pretty eclectic. I start my day with an hour of MSNBC's Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. Then it's the latest 2-minute update from the Onion News Network. After that, I'll listen to WTF with Mark Maron, Here's the Thing with Alec Baldwin, HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and excerpts from E's Chelsea Lately and The Soup with Joel McHale. Also in regular rotation on my Stitcher playlist, the BS Report with ESPN's Bill Simmons, the TechCrunch headlines, and the Don Geronimo Show. The latest episodes of each show, whether originating from broadcasts, cable TV, radio syndication, or podcasts, are continuously updated. Stitcher is a free app for your iPhone, iPad, Kindle, Fire, BlackBerry, Droid, and more. And show your support of Mr. Media by getting, did I mention it's free? The app at Stitcher.com/Mr. Media. That's Stitcher.com/MR Media. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. We're also supported by Audible. Check out Audible's 30-day trial membership and download the audiobook version of the book everyone's been talking about, 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. Sign up for your free trial today at audible.com/radio. Again, audibletrial.com/radio. And finally, if you need a disc jockey for a wedding, bar mitzvah, corporate event, or just a big old party, please consider calling 1-800-DIAL-DJs, the party authority for all your party entertainment needs. You can call 1-800-DIAL-DJs or go to their website, 1-800-DIAL-DJs.com, and tell them Mr. Media sent you. And thanks for listening.